Let's go back to the beginning. When did you first meet Frank, and what was that first meeting like? What were your first impressions of him?
For the first impressions, I was working in a hotel in Sydney, Australia, and it was a hotel where a lot of the boys would stay when they came overseas to Australia, when they did the New Zealand-Australia circuit. So I just happened to be working that night when he checked in, and that was the first of meeting him, of course. This was before computers, and so I would give the mail out the boys and had any messages from their wives and family and that. So I knew them, and I was like a big sister. They were all like my brothers. So it was a very interesting work. So I was kind of the first person he saw when he checked in. And when you have Andre the Giant, and when you have midgets, and when you have everything in between, everybody seems normal.
And that probably made it a lot easier to take to liking a 6.5 foot tall, crazy, bearded, wild-haired man like Bruiser Brody was. How was he when you first interacted with him? Was he friendly? Was he open? Was he an easy person to talk to?
As I said, everybody was very friendly because it was a strange country. You have to remember, this was 1977. It was a whole different lifestyle back then. And coming to a strange country, if you know, it's really quite different. So I was kind of the first person there that kind of reacted and were friends with these different people. So it was just a little bit different, if you understand what I mean. I had known him for probably 2-3 months just by giving mail, and when I was in the front desk or passing by in the hotel and that. Just one night, I filled in the front desk till 11. At 11 o'clock, all the boys were coming back from their wrestling match, and my boss at that time was an American gentleman, and he had a piano bar up the street. So I'm getting ready to leave work, and they were all pulling out of their taxis and that. And they said, well, why don't you just come up to the piano bar? Why don't you just have a drink with us? Well, you know what it was like when you worked late. 11 o'clock at night is like 5 o'clock for other people. So I ended up going. I just went up to the piano bar with them. There was like 12 people. You're talking about giants and midgets and everything. I mean, it was quite a show. And one by one, they all started to leave. Killer Carl Crott was a very good friend of mine, too. He was the one that had asked me up to the piano bar because he'd been there for quite some time in Australia. And so we're all sitting at the table together. One by one, they get up to leave. That's okay. You don't think anything of it. It's a bar. People are having, you know. And one by one, and all of a sudden, I suddenly realized there's only 3 of us here. There's me, Frank, and Carl. Sure enough, Carl gets up to leave. Oh, I'll be back. I'll be right back. Of course, he didn't come back. I found out later I had been worked. He had told everybody, I want to get her by herself. So disappear. So he was still working right then. He worked me right at the very beginning. And then when I ended up coming over here, of course, everybody thought, you know, he was over there for 9 months. Don't worry, he's just using you, you know, being in a strange country. Well, sometimes he would have little problems with the promoter. So he came back on a Friday night and said, I'm leaving for America tomorrow. I expect it. Nice to know you. Goodbye. Well, he'd been paid that night. The next thing, he put this bunch of cash on the table, and he said, I would love you to come over to America. I went, no promises. There was no, this is going to happen or this is going to happen. And it was like knowing how tight he was with money and knowing that for him to put that money on the table, that he trusted me because I could have just kept the money and wouldn't have been any recourse. But he trusted me and I trusted him. And that is kind of how I ended up. And I figured out, I've been in Australia. This is a chance to see America. I had a round-trip ticket. And if it doesn't work out, I've actually taken a chance and seen America. Because if you don't take opportunities when they present themselves, you miss out on so much in life. And I had a round-trip ticket because you have to have a ticket out before you can go to any other country. What is it now? 78? I came here 1978. 42 years. I'm still here, so I guess it kind of worked out.